Minister. I just want to make a couple of points about some international matters before dealing with the announcement of today. First of all, I'm looking forward very much to, much later this evening, in fact the early hours of tomorrow morning, I will be joining President Biden and Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Suga from Japan in what will be the first ever leaders meeting of what is known as the Quad. This is a historic meeting of 4 leaders from these nations which are such close friends. And I'm looking forward to the discussions that we'll be having over a range of topics, in particular how we're dealing in the region with COVID-19, the challenges that we have of security and the maritime domain here across the Indo-Pacific, and also, of course, how we're working together to achieve net zero into the future on emissions and move to a new energy economy right across the Indo-Pacific region and indeed around the world. And I'm sure there'll be many other issues that we address and the technology partnerships that will be necessary to achieve those goals. So it is an historic moment, and I think it does demonstrate Australia's agency in the world. This is something that we have been working towards for many years now. It has been a goal of ours to see the leaders' meeting of the Quad come together. There have been meetings of foreign ministers, there have been many other meetings, but when governments come together at the highest level, this shows a whole new level of cooperation to create a new anchor for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, and working with important other partners in the region, in particular the ASEAN nations, and their view of the Indo-Pacific, which so much informs our own. So looking forward to that tonight. It will be in the wee small hours of tomorrow morning, but I can assure you I'll be bright-eyed as we engage in what will be an incredibly important gathering for Australia. Also in international news, the OECD candidacy's gone into extra time. It's in the golden point, I can tell you, right now. And while Matthias Cormann may not have been an NRL fan, but an AFL fan, I'm sure he is getting all the support that is necessary, and I really want to thank him and the whole team and all of those around the world that I've engaged with over these many months. A very important role that Australia is seeking to have our nominee accede to. The OECD brings together like-minded countries from all around the world, like-minded liberal democracies from the Americas, from Asia Pacific, from Europe and across to the United Kingdom. We've been a member since its foundation, and we're very pleased for the first time to be putting ourselves forward for such a unique international role. But we're here today at this dealership because for me, motor dealers have been a touchstone through the course of the pandemic. Early on, I was one of those, in fact, on some occasions, a very lonely voice, when there were those who thought we should shut the car dealerships down during COVID-19. And I said, we can't do that. There's no need to do that. Many of the dealerships, as we see here, people are outside, they're very large buildings, there's the room and the space where these things could be managed, and we fought very hard to ensure that dealerships stayed open. But we didn't stop there. JobKeeper has been a lifeline to the dealerships right across the country. In fact, Bill Gibson's here, and the operations they have and the hundreds of employees they have, they graduated off JobKeeper at the end of September. But for that 6-month period, it held this business together. It held the employees, the apprentices, the others who are part of this business together. Now they've graduated from JobKeeper. And as they've graduated from JobKeeper, they've seen their own business really start to improve. And most recent data from new vehicle sales is showing, particularly amongst youths and youth sales, that is driving a lot of the recovery we're seeing in retail sales across the country. And that is the evidence of the comeback of our economy. And it is the evidence of how businesses, small, medium, even large, family businesses like the one we have here, have been able to make their way through, their Australian way through the COVID-19 pandemic and be part of what is a striking recovery here in Australia that is leading the world out of the COVID-19 recession. But there are not just COVID-19 impacts that hit dealerships like these and many around the world. The agency model, the way dealers work with manufacturers is changing. And recently you'll know that the government took very strong steps to hold the big tech multinational companies to account and redress the balance of power imbalance that existed for media companies and that existed for news media organisations in this country. We have a reputation as a government of standing up to large multinationals to ensure that Australian companies get a fair go. And the same is true for motor dealers here in Australia. And so what we're announcing today, after much consultation and working with the sector, is we'll be moving forward on a very similar basis to the way that we've been dealing with those big tech companies, with the big manufacturing companies and multinationals from overseas. Now, I know many of those companies will welcome those changes, those big manufacturers from overseas. And I'm pretty confident that the ones that Edwina works with will welcome those sorts of changes. But there'll be others. They're going to need a bit of the treatment that we had to apply to those big tech multinationals to get them around the table and to ensure that Australian companies got a fair deal. And so the arrangements we're announcing today is to put into place mandatory requirements on the good faith bargaining that is required, increased penalties for those who breach those arrangements. We expect big multinational companies to deal with Australian companies fairly and to do the right thing. They're not allowed to come and ride roughshod and justify it on the changes to their business models for decisions taken in other parts of the world. We want to ensure that our Australian companies continue to provide the great service. And here in this company you can see what that means for ordinary Australians. New apprentices taking on boosting apprenticeships around the country, getting their chance. People have come to this country from other countries, migrated here, got their skills, like Reza, who runs this shop floor right here, now training others and bringing them forward. That's what family businesses like this do, and we're backing them in, and we will stand up to the multinationals on their behalf and make sure they get a fair deal. I'm going to ask Michaelia Cash to take you through the details, and then we'll hear from the dealers, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Prime Minister, and it really is a delight to join the Prime Minister, Dr Fiona Martin, my very good friend and colleague, but also Edwina and Simone, who are running the dealership that we're at today, but also James Vortman and Stavros, who are here today on behalf of the thousands of car dealers across Australia. Small and family business, they are the backbone of the Australian economy. There are around 3,000 dealers across Australia. They employ around 60,000 Australians, and here in Edwina and Simone's business alone, they employ over the two sites around 180 Australians. And I was just delighted today to meet some of the new apprentices that they've taken on, 12 this year, under the Morrison government's Boosting Apprenticeships Commencement Initiative. And that, of course, is the 50% wage subsidy for those 12 apprentices. But today we're here because when you back family businesses, small and family businesses, every step of the way, you need to ensure that the playing field that they play on is a fair one. And certainly the consultation that we have had with the dealers across Australia has shown the government that it's not. And that is why we're announcing today very, very strong changes in relation to the franchise code, but more specifically the automotive schedule to the franchise code. The three changes that we will implement almost immediately are an increase in the penalties. If a manufacturer breaches the good faith negotiation part of the code, they will now face a fine of up to $10 million. The feedback we received from dealers was very much that the current penalties, $66,000 per breach, they were seen by the manufacturers as just the cost of doing business. It can never be just the cost of doing business, and that is why we will now increase the maximum penalty that a court can apply to $10 million. We will also ensure that the agency model is covered by the automotive schedule. As the Prime Minister has acknowledged, businesses do change the way they do business, but we want to ensure that when a car manufacturer decides to change the way they do business in Australia, they still have to abide by the strict laws that we have in place. So we will explicitly now include the agency model in the automotive code. And of course, the voluntary principles which were released earlier this year, in particular to ensure fairness. When a car dealer is negotiating a new agreement with a manufacturer, they will now become mandatory. And that means that when you're actually negotiating that new agreement, the car dealer, they are able to say to the manufacturer, we need to include a clause that is all about compensation. In the event that the manufacturer decides to close its business or leave Australia, that car dealer will get fair and reasonable compensation. We will also now, though, continue to consult in relation to a standalone automotive code, because many of the issues that car dealers face, they are unique to this industry. But as the Prime Minister has also said, we will also seek to consult in relation to picking up what we've done with the media bargaining code and applying it to the automotive industry. And that is, in the event that a car dealer and a car manufacturer cannot come to an agreement, for example, in relation to the amount of compensation that a manufacturer will pay to the dealer in the event that they terminate the agreement, compulsory arbitration will apply. I think that any Australian listening to this today will say, isn't that just fair? And the answer to that question is yes. 3,000 dealers, 60,000 Australians who every day rely on their job with their dealers. We're going to back the dealers every step of the way, and that's why today we're announcing the strengthening of the automotive code. Thank you.
Well, today is a great day for the automotive industry. Dealers in country towns and cities across Australia will be celebrating, because today the government has made an announcement which will see a fair and reasonable standard set. A fair and reasonable standard that many of the most ethically minded manufacturers are already adhering to. It will also provide dealers with confidence. Confidence to employ more people, confidence to take on more apprentices, confidence to invest in their businesses, continue to pay their taxes in Australia, and also support those sporting teams and community groups that they already do. I want to say a massive thank you to the Prime Minister for making this announcement today. A big thank you to the Small and Family Business Minister, Michaelia Cash, for sticking up for Aussie dealers. Thank you to the local member, Fiona Martin, who has been taking this issue up in Canberra. Thank you to everyone involved, and to the Morrison government for all you've done over the past 12 months.
Yes, I can only relay what the Prime Minister, Mr Cash, and my colleagues from the industry have said. We are very grateful that the Morrison government has taken this initiative, and we've worked hard for many decades tabling the concerns for a fairer retail and dealer agreement with the franchise laws, and to hope that we can have a fairer trading agreement for the future. Thank you.
As usual, why don't we just take a few questions, as many as you like, on this announcement today, and particularly while we have the industry representatives here with us, and Edwina, if you'd like to raise some questions on that. And then I'm happy to say thank you for being here with us, and if you like, we can move to other issues. So, on standing up for Australia's motor dealers, well, I'm pleased to see there's so much support for that. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you in particular, Edwina, for allowing us to come here today, and for Reza for allowing us to be here in his shop. Okay. Yes.
Prime Minister, what's your message to China as to how its position is following the Quad leaders meeting? Should Beijing be concerned?
No, I don't see why. I mean, this is about 4 nations that have had a long-term interest in the Indo-Pacific. For us, this is where we live. This is where Japan lives. This is where India lives, and of course where the United States across the Pacific has had a long-term presence. And so this is about an anchor for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, and that benefits all nations of the Indo-Pacific. It benefits all the sovereign nations, and particularly our ASEAN partners that we've been a close friend of for so long. And this is about ensuring that we can trade more easily. It's about ensuring that we can do that peacefully, that there is a freedom of movement within the seas and the overflight of the area to ensure there's the facilitation of trade and movement across our great region. And these four nations, liberal democracies, standing up for our values, coming together and ensuring that we're an anchor for peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific.
Prime Minister, how
crucial is it that state governments give a guarantee that borders remain open to keep for this fact to be successful? And why is there much funding going to Queensland destinations when Queensland government is one of the main states to keep the borders closed?
Well, let me make a couple of points. First of all, I'm very pleased. I learned overnight there was a 75% increase yesterday in Australians searching for domestic holidays in response to the announcement. That was just yesterday, hearing that back overnight from the airlines, from that initial announcement yesterday. And it all starts in 1st of April, and that means over the next couple of weeks. I spoke to some large wholesalers last night. They are putting their product together, discounted product to go with the discounted airfares, to package that up and to make sure it's ready for Australians who frankly deserve a holiday. Sydney-siders, Melbourne-siders, Melburnians, or wherever they are in the country, They deserve a break. They've been working hard for this last year. It's been a really tough year. And by ensuring that they can get that break with them and their family, and they get the opportunity to support those parts of our tourism industry around the country that are hurt most and most reliant on the international tourism sector, then that's what this is all about. Now, of course, we want to see the domestic borders remain open, and that'll ensure the benefits of this package flows through to those who need it most. And so, of course, we would expect premiers to want the flow of this benefit into their states, and particularly their regions that are most reliant on international tourism. And this is the key point. This is all about addressing what the ongoing impacts of the close of international borders are. International borders. And so what we've done with the support of Austrade and other advisors is to identify those initial places that not only where tourism is a very significant part of their local economy, but international tourism is a very significant part of their tourism economy. And that's how we've selected the places. It's not selected on the basis of which premiers and states have been naughty and nice. That's not what this is about. This is about trying to get targeted support to those Australians on the ground who need more tourists in those communities. That's what it's designed to do. All of our responses to the pandemic have been targeted. They've been proportionate. They've been temporary. They've also been very disciplined, seeking to respect the taxpayer. The taxpayer is providing $1.2 billion in support. That's no small amount. That is a significant amount. I used to work in the tourism sector. This would be the single largest support package specifically for the tourism and travel industry in Australia's history. So it is a big package. The taxpayers are putting their hands in their pocket to put money in the pockets of those who are in these distressed regions. And so that is what has driven our decisions. And as other locations we think can become part of this scheme, then we'll look at that. And we've already indicated that right from the outset. But the places we've picked at this point are really those who are most disproportionately impacted by the closing of international borders. And so to ensure that we can get the help to them, then we need those domestic borders to stay open.
Prime Minister,
A number
yesterday,
of European countries have suspended the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine. Are you concerned about this, and should we be following suit?
No, I took advice again this morning, as you know, I'm acting health minister as well as Prime Minister for the next few days, from Professor Murphy, and no, that is not the view of our medical advisors. And TGA obviously looks at these reports when they come through, but they do their own batch testing, as I was visiting just this week, on the batches that are made available and going out across Australia. There's some 300,000 doses that are already out and being distributed from AstraZeneca, and there's another 400,000 which are about to go out. Now, that of course is a lot less than what we'd anticipated of international supply in these early phases. We'd anticipated that to be around 3.8 million. Now, that obviously has an impact on the amount of doses available in these early stages of the rollout, and that is, as Professor Murphy said yesterday, that has an obvious impact on the early stage rollout. But the fact is, we should be at around 150,000 doses administered by the end of this week. We said many months ago, in fact about a month ago in particular, that we would hope to get in those early phases to around 80,000 a week. Now we are getting up to those levels now as we conclude our third week. The other point I'd make about vaccines, given you've raised the topic, and I note the response to what was in evidence given yesterday by Professor Murphy. This is not news. The Health Minister made it very clear on the 16th of February. I was standing right next to him, as was Professor John Skerritt, in the courtyard in Canberra, where we made it very clear that the change in the advice that the second dose being received after 12 weeks rather than 4 weeks meant that the second dose having been received for AstraZeneca by the end of October wouldn't be possible. That was made very clear by the Health Minister a month ago. So that isn't new information. It's important that as we continue to update, that it's important to stay up to date on where the goalposts are on this. And so that was not a surprise yesterday, certainly not to me. That was what we'd advised the country a month ago. But as the vaccination rolls out, as another 1,000 GPs come into this system over the next week and the weeks ahead, ramping up to more than 4,000. That army of a dose administrators will be significant, and we will get to the point also with the rollout of the domestically produced vaccines from AstraZeneca out of Melbourne, and that will really enable us to ramp up.
Prime Minister, why shouldn't showgrounds, football stadiums, car parks or perhaps raceways be used to help utilise and boost the rollout of the vaccine?
Well, the vaccine strategy worked up particularly for these early phases. We're not talking about the balance of the population in these early weeks. We're talking about 82-year-olds in aged care facilities. We're talking about healthcare workers. We're talking about those who are working in quarantine, and we're making great progress through the state-based arrangements for those workers, and we've given additional doses, particularly here in New South Wales, because they carry the major load of the quarantine system here in Australia. And they're working steadfastly through that, and here in New South Wales they're making great progress on that. Our priority at this time is getting into those aged care areas, and about a quarter or thereabouts of the total amount we've been able to vaccinate so far. I think there's about 380 facilities, just over that we've already been able to reach. So we're not going to pick people up out of aged care homes, put them on buses and take them to stadiums. That's not the right thing to do. That's not the care way to administer these vaccines in these early phases. We'll also be going out into Indigenous communities very soon. And those 400,000 AstraZeneca, which obviously don't have to be stored at sub 71 degrees, that gives us the opportunity to be reaching out into those Indigenous communities. And so we need to go there rather than bringing them to where we are. Now, as we go on, we'll continue to work closely with the states. The GP system will have up to around 5,000 GPs involved in this process, and a handful compared to 5,000. I was advised this morning around about only 30 have decided they don't want to participate. Thousands are saying they're going to be involved in this. They do it with flu jabs every year. And so they're involved with that rollout. We do millions upon millions of these vaccinations on flus every year. This is a specific type of vaccine, and that's the primary method through which we're administering that system. And the states have their systems as well, which we're boosting as well. There's the GP respiratory clinics as well, which is a larger system for administering these doses. And so that's the right plan for Australia. We're not in the situation that the United Kingdom is, or Italy, where 300 people are dying a day. That's not the crisis situation that we find ourselves in. So we can do it in this orderly way, and do it in a way where we can provide the appropriate care, particularly the most vulnerable, those who are disabled and those who are aged.
So, Prime Minister, yesterday you said everyone would be vaccinated by October, and you said that on television. Today you're now saying...
No, you're misunderstanding me. The first dose will be administered by the end of October. That's what I meant.
So, when are you going to be honest with people?
I am being, right now.
How delayed the vaccine rollout is, because the information that you've been given has not been consistent.
No, I totally reject that. We were clear a month ago that the October deadline would not include the second dose. The Minister said that a month ago, and that's what Professor Murphy said yesterday. So that's what the government's saying. What you're reporting is up to you. But what the government has said has been very clear. And it was the move from 4 weeks to 12 weeks, which meant the second dose being completed by the end of October for all of those who were seeking them. That wasn't going to be possible. The Minister made that point. The early stage, we've been very clear. We were supposed to get and contracted to get 3.8 million AstraZeneca vaccines in these early weeks. We've got way less than that, 700,000. But the fact we've been able to get 700,000 out of Europe, given what they're going through in Europe, has been a Herculean effort by our agencies to achieve that. And already now, we're getting to those early figures of around 80,000 a week, which we hope to get to in those early phases. And we'll continue to update the Australian people as we have been doing, and I would encourage you to follow those updates carefully. Yep.
Just shifting slightly, so China has donated vaccines to the IOC for athletes. Would you feel comfortable with Australian athletes taking a Chinese vaccine?
Well, that is something that those athletes have to decide, based on their own medical advice. My only advice is that I can give is the advice that I received from the Therapeutic Goods Administration about the vaccines that we believe are safe for Australians. They've been tested here in Australia, and in the majority of cases they will have been produced here in Australia. And I'm sure the AOC is very mindful of that and ensure that our athletes get the best possible advice to support them in the health decisions that ultimately they have to make.
Last question.
How long have you known that Haha Lu has been identified as an agent of foreign interference, and what have you done to respond to his links to Michael Super and Gladys Lu?
Look, I'm not going to go into details on those matters. I don't tend to comment on national security matters, but I think the implication in your question, I wouldn't agree with the implication.
Back to the Europe situation. I mean, must be really concerning reports to you of people dying after getting blood clots following the vaccine. Has the PPA requested data on this? And what should Australians be worried about this, given the fact that there's no one with COVID in Australia, let alone dying?
Well, all the data from all of the places that we have relationships, which obviously includes Europe, is being fed into the TGA, as I indicated in response to an earlier question. And that data is examined, and that's what informs the decisions that we take here in Australia. Remember, the batches that we distribute across Australia, those batches are tested here in Australia. They're tested here by the TGA. I was watching them doing it just earlier this week. And so we have a very robust process for examining that. And as additional data, as I said late last year, we would have a front row seat on the rollout of the vaccine in many other countries where they've had to do that because of their urgent crisis situation. And the learnings from that have been taken into account as we've been rolling out the vaccine safely here in Australia.
Do you not worry by this report?
Well, I trust our Therapeutic Goods Administration and the advice that they and the advice they give me, and the data you're saying that they should seek, they get, and they analyse it. And if they have any change to the advice, then they tell me.
But you're not worried personally about?
No, I'm not.
Prime Minister, yesterday Brendan Murphy said that the first dose of the vaccine is almost as good as the second dose. Do you think that sends a dangerous message, considering that you want people to go and get vaccinated?
Well, you must get 2 doses, and he didn't say get 2 doses. What he said was exactly what you just outlined, and that was that the first dose of the vaccine has a very good effect. And you may be interested to know that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is a single-dose vaccine, not a 2-dose vaccine, is reporting its results, and they are very similar, I understand, to what the first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine is producing in those other jurisdictions. So what he's saying is the first dose is a good dose. The first dose actually provides quite an effect, but the course of those doses is to have 2, and that's what we've invested $6.5 billion in ensuring Australians will have across the portfolio of vaccines that we've committed to, and that means we'll be in a position to ensure that that first dose, that has been our target, and we will continue to update against that target. We are providing at least weekly, if not daily now, updates on the vaccination program, and I look forward to that scaling up in the weeks ahead. Thank you very much.